I'm adding this on as a little addendum before I get into the bulk of this video, which will deal with Anita Sarkeesian's attitude and perspective towards sexualized violence in her latest video, Women as Background Decoration 2. Before I get into that, there's a very fundamental question that I think needs addressing if games developers are going to have any chance of making the kind of changes that I think Anita Sarkeesian would like them to make. So I'm going to take you back to a little bit of footage of Anita in Damsels in Distress Part 2 from over a year ago, where Anita has given us throughout the video numerous examples of violence on female non-player characters, either as a means of plot development or as a means of character development. So this is what Anita has to say.
Of course, if you look at any of these games in isolation, you'll be able to find incidental narrative circumstances that can be used to explain away the inclusion of violence against women as a plot device. But just because a particular event might make sense within the internal logic of a fictional narrative, that doesn't in and of itself justify its use.
Okay, so that's Anita's position regarding violence within these games towards female non-player characters. What I'm interested in is what is Anita's perspective regarding the violence, often just as gruesome, just as horrific, that is visited on male non-player characters within these games, often for the same reasons of advancing the plot and advancing character development. Now, I know that when I make that, I'm risking people saying, this is just an argument, what about the men's? Listen, I entirely accept that Anita is justified if she's interested in women and she's interested in female characters only to make her videos from that perspective, purely about female characters. But if Anita is interested in changing what games developers do, then I think she needs to give games developers a bit of a helping hand so that they know what the real issue is here. So Anita, this is the question that I'm asking. When the same kind of gruesome violence is visited upon male non-player characters as it is probably many times over compared to female characters, is that okay? That is the question that I'm asking. If you think it is okay, that this kind of violence is okay, as long as it's always and only male non-player characters that are on the receiving end of this violence, then let us know. Or if you think that this kind of violence is wrong, whether it's a male or a female non-player character, then again you have to let us know, because otherwise the games developers might just remove this kind of violence when aimed at female characters, but end up leaving the violence in when it's aimed at male characters. So we need to know what your position is, Anita. What is your beef? Is it with the violence itself, and you want to see this kind of violence for plot and character development removed regardless of who the target of the violence is? Or is it really only when female characters are the victim? We can carry on as we always have done in these games with the gruesome, violent content for plot and character development. Just make sure that the victims of this violence are exclusively male non-player characters. Really be fascinated for Anita to clarify that one. I think it would be a really useful thing for her to clarify. I hope you enjoy the rest of this video. One of the complaints that I hear from people who generally tend to side and sympathise with Anita Sarkeesian and her arguments is that much of the criticism that Anita attracts is directed at Anita Sarkeesian the person and not at the arguments that she makes. I'm unfortunately not the person to deconstruct Anita Sarkeesian's video series, not least because that video series apparently has taken about $150,000 to create, and whilst I greatly appreciate the support that my Patreon patrons have given me over the last couple of months and allowed me to do several things that I wouldn't have done otherwise, I'm still about $149,500 short of where I'd need to be to compete with Anita in terms of making a comparable video series there. But there is one particular argument that I'd like to pick up because I think it is indicative of one of the problems that I have with Anita Sarkeesian's argument. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you a clip of Anita Sarkeesian making the argument. This is in her video Women as Background Decoration 2, in which she's bemoaning the portrayal of rape and sexual violence within video games. So let me play you a clip of Anita Sarkeesian, but because I'm one of the best people on YouTube at doing impersonations of people, I'm going to do the voiceover in lieu of Anita.
There, you happy now?
It is casual cruelty implemented as an easy way to deliver a quick emotional punch to the player by presenting attacks to characters specifically designed to appear pitifully vulnerable. These scenes are of no real purpose in the plot, other than to let the audience know the perpetrators are the good guys that we should be rooting for.
My mother like that again, you little whore!
Ow! It was just a goddamn whore, man. A goddamn filthy whore.
It is a lazy shorthand for good, meant to further motivate the protagonist to take the villain's side and help empathise with the villain. Okay, so just in case there was any doubt there, because I am fucking good at this kind of thing, that was my voice you was listening to and not Anita's. But you can see the argument that Anita was making there, and I'm sure that, like me, you have some sympathy there. We're portraying rape and sexual assaults as moral goods, as good things to do. And we're portraying, in fact, they're actually being used as a vehicle to show rapists and people who commit sexual assaults as good and upstanding people. The kind of people we'd want to cheer on, the kind of people we would side with. So on this occasion, I'm sure you can agree that Anita has got a point. The only problem is that the voiceover I made for that particular clip didn't include the actual words that Anita used. So let's have a look at the actual words that Anita used. Let's have Anita present her own argument.
There, you happy now?
It's casual cruelty implemented as an easy way to deliver a quick emotional punch to the player by presenting attacks on characters specifically designed to appear pitifully vulnerable. These scenes serve no real purpose in the plot other than to let the audience know that the perpetrators are truly deplorable monsters.
Never speak of my mother like that again, you little whore!
Ow! It was just a goddamn whore, man. A goddamn filthy whore.
It's a lazy shorthand for evil, meant to further motivate the protagonist to take the villain down and help justify the excessive violence committed by the player in these games.
So that's Anita in her own words, and it's clear that she's played these games or watched playthroughs of these games, and she has pinpointed that rape and sexual assault are almost always portrayed in the most negative light possible. In fact, moreover, they're portrayed in a more negative light than often the most gratuitous of murders and non-sexual assaults. And this is the thing. She's made the point, and I agree with the point that she's made, that perhaps as a result that we've become a bit blasé towards non-sexual violence, there is simply so much of it within video games that showing the bad guy blowing somebody's brains out or disemboweling them isn't enough to give us the emotional kick that they are looking for to portray the abhorrence and the evil with regard to the villain that they want to portray, and so they resort to the crimes that really trigger a response in us, such as the crimes of rape and sexual assault. Anita Sarkeesian notices this, accepts this the same as you or I do, and you would think surely, however little praise she has for these games in other terms, and however grudging the praise would be, that she would at least be able to raise some praise for the games in this particular aspect, that they are portraying these crimes that she so abhors as such abhorrent crimes. They are showing these crimes as universal moral wrongs. But even that seems to be worthy of nothing but criticism from Anita's perspective. And that leads me on really to kind of summing up the issue that I have here with Anita, and you can guess that it's going to be one of these ones along the lines of games developers are damned if they do and damned if they don't. But to show you how deeply that runs in this particular instance, I've created for you, I'm now going to bore you with and colour in a graph. It's going to be a little bit like the political elections that you have, and I'm going to colour the graph in red or blue. So let me show you the graph. Okay, so here is my graph that I've kindly created on your behalf. Lucky, lucky you. So the grey area, the bounded area, represents the possibilities that a games developer has for representing sexual assaults or rapes. And what you have then on the horizontal axis is how is that rape or sexual assault and the perpetrator of that assault represented? Are they represented as a good act and a good person, or a bad act and a bad person? Pretty straightforward there. On the vertical axis, on the y-axis, it's how many of these things we see represented. If you went to the origin there right in the centre, what you would be looking at is that rape or sexual assault portrayed as a neutral act. And in terms of representation, you'd want the representation to match society relative to non-sexual crimes. So looking at some statistics before I started this video, there are about 6 or 7 rapes or something like that for each murder in US society. So you would expect to see 6 or 7 rapes for every murder portrayed within the game to hit that middle spot there. So here comes the really exciting, but it's going to get fucking exciting now because we're going to start filling this graph in. I think the first thing we should possibly do is to put on the spot the kinds of examples that Anita was showing us. So let's put a little X in where those would be, and as you can see, it's right down there in the bottom right hand corner, because as Anita agrees with the rest of us that it's portraying rape not just as a bad crime, but as a crime that's worse than crimes like murder and serious non-sexual violence, because those crimes just don't cut the mustard in terms of portraying the assailant as evil as they would like to portray them. So it needs to be shunted right over to the right hand side, and it still needs to be right down the bottom because these crimes are so rarely shown. Even in games like Grand Theft Auto, where there are a couple of examples, compared to the number of murders that are shown, the sexual violence is still most notable by its absence. So we're right down in the bottom corner there. Now let's start shading some of this in. You can see that there's 2 options that we have. In the red camp, we have those areas that are going to be criticism worthy by the likes of Anita Sarkeesian. And in the blue corner, we're going to fill in those bits that are praiseworthy. That's the sweet spot, perhaps, that the developers need to be looking for. I think it's immediately apparent that everything towards the left hand of the graph is going to be criticism worthy. If rape is portrayed as good and rapists are portrayed as good, the likes of Anita Sarkeesian are going to be heavy with their criticism, and quite understandably. So bang, let's fill a load of red in there, get that bit out the way. We also know that our little X there, the examples that Anita gave, was worthy of criticism because she criticised it. So we can put a little red blob in there. And we know everything to the left of that blob is going to be filled in red as well, because obviously that's the same type of representation, the same level of representation, I should say, but portraying rape in as being better than it was portrayed in those examples. Clearly, if those examples was worthy of criticism, and not on the grounds that there just isn't enough examples within video games, then everything above that line needs to be filled in red, because all that means is that you've got even more examples to criticise and not less. So let's have a look at where we're at with the graph now. And if you're a Republican supporter in the US or a Labour supporter in the UK, things are looking pretty damn peachy at this particular point. All we're left with is this little sliver in the bottom right. Is this going to be praiseworthy? Is this a little haven there for the games developers where they can get away without taking it on the chin? Well, let's have a little look here. Rape and sexual assault are portrayed so infrequently that effectively this little sliver of area that we've got under here amounts to no portrayals whatsoever. And here's a little thing you've got to bear in mind. One of the indicators and symptoms of rape culture, we are told, is downplaying the prevalence of rape and sexual assault. If you claim or downplay how many rapes or sexual assaults actually take place, then that is indicative, that is symptomatic of rape culture. And that is something that is worthy of criticism. If games don't portray rapes and sexual assaults at all, then clearly that is going to be cited, or potentially can be cited as evidence of rape culture, because they're glossing over the rapes and sexual assaults that actually happen there in the real world and claiming that all the violence that takes place is of a non-sexual nature. So unfortunately, we've got to colour that bit in red as well. Okay, so that concludes the usage of the graph, and what a total Pepsi Max moment of videography that was in terms of excitement. I'm just pleased actually that there wasn't a fucking bull in the room stood beside me, because there was so much fucking red paint on the screen there that I think it probably would have charged straight through my monitor and out through the wall. I hope that emphasises the kind of issues that I have with Anita Sarkeesian here, that over two axes, even when we stretch the issue over two axes there doesn't seem to be any space whatsoever for the developers, whichever way they move. They're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. If they portray rape as bad, they're in the wrong. If they portray rape as good, they're in the wrong. If they overrepresent rape, they're in the wrong. If they underrepresent rape, they're in the wrong. There is criticism-worthy potential for Anita Sarkeesian, food stuff for her videos, and a very expensive video series regardless of what they do. Of course, I should try and preempt the response, which would be, yes, Jim, we do want to see these crimes represented in video games, but they need to be treated with exquisite sensitivity, trod around very, very carefully when they're represented. So what they want to see, I think, is for 2 or 3 hours of people having their bowels and intestines gouged out and their heads blown off at point blank range, and then all of a sudden, stop the bus! We need to now discuss a rape or a sexual assault. So for the next 20 minutes, we're going to go into moral philosophy mode. The gameplay is going to stop. The enjoyment of the game is going to stop. And we're going to have a serious consideration of the issues of sexual crimes. Is that really a realistic expectation to have in video games? Let me show you some footage from a recent Mortal Kombat game. You know, I can't help but think that if I was to get Anita Sarkeesian to critique that little montage of Mortal Kombat clips, that she wouldn't so much criticise Jade clean ripping the guy's head off his shoulders and then violently impaling it on a pole whilst he's still alive. It would be that she wasn't wearing enough clothes whilst she did it. The whole point of showing you that footage was that if you play Mortal Kombat, there's a whole lot more of that kind of thing. And at no point does the game sit you down and say, right, now we need to start dealing with this subject of ultra-violence sensitively and start looking at the ethics of this kind of violence and how it translates into real life. And the reason it doesn't do that is because it isn't a fucking moral philosophy class. It's a fucking video game. It is there for entertainment, and there's this tacit understanding that we are aware of that, and we are aware that this is not the right medium to have a serious discussion about these acts in society. This is the issue that I have with Anita Sarkeesian, and I hope that I've detailed it in this video, which is this kind of vibe that I get, that in many cases games developers are damned if they do and damned if they don't. Whatever they do, she will find grounds to criticise what they have done, and alarm bells always ring when I feel that that is what is going on with somebody and the arguments that they make. Well, I hope you didn't mind listening to this little rundown on one of the issues that I have with Anita Sarkeesian. I'd like to thank you for watching this video, and bye for now.